Hello everyone, this is Kenshin. Welcome to History Talk. Please move your fingers to subscribe, click on the favorite message to share. Also please open the little bell, thank you. Today's History Talk is the overlooked facts of the Battle of Verdun. During the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which lasted for more than a year, the longest battle with the largest casualties on both sides was the Battle of Bakhmut, which will definitely be remembered in the future record of this war that provoked the cooperation between Europe and the United States. We all know that the First World War was the war with the largest casualties in the history of mankind, so which was the one with the heaviest casualties? That is what happened in February 21, 1916 to December 18. The First World War, in the longest and bloodiest conflict in the Battle of Verdun, lasted more than 10 months of fighting. France, in order to stop the German large-scale attack. The total number of casualties in France about 400,000 people, the number of casualties in Germany about 350,000 people, a total of about 300,000 people on both sides died in the battlefield. Today, Kenshin would like to share with you some of the facts about this battle that many people have overlooked. 1. The Germans designed Verdun as a war of attrition. World War I battles usually start with a tactical objective and then turn into a bloody stalemate, but most historians believe that Verdun was an exception to this rule and that the Germans intended to turn the battle into a meat grinder from the beginning. Falkenhayn pointed out that Germany could only win the war if the British were forced to make peace by inflicting heavy casualties on the French army and weakening their will to fight. Falkenhayn did not intend to defeat his opponents or break through the defenses, but planned to lure the French army into a trap, forcing it to engage in a war of attrition in which the conditions were favorable to Germany. If France does this, the French army will bleed to death. In the memo written by Falkenhayn, this plan is roughly translated as trial or place of execution. 2. Verdun is symbolic for both sides. So Germany chose Verdun as a target not only because of its prominent location on the Western Front, but also because of its long political history. An ancient city, Verdun was one of the last cities to fall in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870–71, which resulted in Prussia's crushing defeat to France, and has since been converted into one of the strongest fortresses along the German-French border. Falkenhayn knew that any threat to it would be hotly contested and that its fall would be an unacceptable blow to French morale. But the Treaty of Verdun of 843 AD, which divided the Carolingian Empire and created what was to become the core of Germany, also had historical and emotional value for Germany. 3. The attack took the French by surprise. Germany's preparations for the Battle of Verdun were one of the largest concentrations of men and equipment of World War I. Falkenhayn ordered the use of rugged terrain and enormous air power to cover the army's movements. Falkenhayn ordered the use of rugged terrain and enormous air power to conceal the movement of troops, spent 7 weeks building new railroad lines to assemble heavy concrete bunkers to house the defenses, and deployed more than 1,200 artillery guns and 2.5 million rounds of shells in 1,300 ammunition trains to the front. It is most surprising that France did not make adequate preparations for the German attack, despite the fact that the obvious work was being carried out under French supervision. The fortresses around Verdun saw little action in the early stages of the war, when much of the garrison and artillery was moved to warmer climates, and even with last-minute preparations, France was at an early disadvantage when the bad weather slowed the German advance. By February 24, 3 days after the German bombardment, the Germans had advanced several miles and broken through 2 French lines. 4. The Germans captured an important French fortress without firing a single shot. By February 25 the Germans were approaching Château d'Aumont, the largest of the dozens of French forts around Verdun. Normally everyone would have considered Douaumont almost impregnable, but in the previous months the garrison had been reduced to only 57 men, less than 2 platoons. The news of the fall of Douaumont was celebrated in Germany, even schools were closed in response, and it was a severe blow to the already weakened French morale, which finally came to an end in October 1916, when a small German force led by Lieutenant Eugen Latkat entered the fort through an unguarded passageway and encircled the French defenders one by one in the basement. Finally, in October 1916, after 8 months and tens of thousands of casualties, France finally recaptured the fortress. 5. The French defend Verdun by means of the Sacred Way. Lack of safe rail transportation and the threat of constant German bombing forced France to rely on a road only 20 feet wide as a supply road to Verdun. When General Philippe Pétain took over the French army in late February 1916, he took steps to keep the supply line open by graveling and repairing the road and mobilizing 3,000 military and civilian trucks for military transport. In the next week alone, more than 190,000 French troops and 25,000 tons of ammunition, food and supplies were brought to the Verdun front. Pétain also used the road to rotate more than 40 divisions in and out of the Verdun fortified area, keeping the French defense forces in fighting shape and helping to ward off the effects of the artillery bombardment. The road was later renamed the Sacred Road to commemorate its significance to the Battle of Verdun. 6. Destructive use of artillery included in battle. An estimated 70% of the 800,000 casualties on both sides at Verdun were caused by artillery. From the beginning, the Germans bombarded and fired 2 million shells, more than in any other battle in history, and even in the next 10 months a total of 40 to 60 million shells were fired by both sides, and even the sound of artillery fire could be heard 100 miles from Verdun, and soldiers reported that certain hills were so heavily bombarded that they were on fire like volcanoes. Soldiers who were lucky enough to survive were often hit hard by falling bombs. A French soldier who was shelled by the Germans at Verdun wrote, "I arrived there with 175 men, and finally left with 34, a few of whom were half-mad, and did not reply when spoken to." The battle was a terrible one. 7. The French Air Force at Verdun included American pilots. In the early stages of the Battle of Verdun, Germany had the advantage in the air, but that was reversed when France amassed 226 aircraft and formed one of the first fighter squadrons in history. The most famous was the Lafayette Squadron, a group of mostly American pilots that began service in April 1916, a year before the United States officially entered the war, with a roster of 38 American expatriates and veterans of the French Foreign Legion. The squadron was known for its Indian Bravery badge on fighter planes and a pair of lion cub mascots named Whiskey and Soda. All told, Lafayette Squadron pilots won some 30 or more aerial victories, most of which occurred during the interrupted 5-month period at Verdun. Most of them occurred during the 5-month Verdun hiatus. 8. The Battle of the Somme may have helped to turn the tide. For those who know the history of the First World War, the Battle of the Somme, one of the battles that rivaled the bloody killings at Verdun, was a victory that relieved the pressure on the French army as it was on the verge of collapse. On July 1, 1916, when French General Joseph Joffre stated that his army would soon cease to exist, the Allied forces launched a costly and brutal attack on the Somme. Especially after Russia captured hundreds of thousands of Austro-Hungarian troops at Brusilov, the German army continued to attack Verdun, although the attack forced the Germans to choose to relocate their men and armaments from the area. But after the last unsuccessful attack in July, the Germans were forced to cede the lead in the area in response to a fierce French counterattack. France recovered the lost fortresses and pushed Germany back to the starting point of the campaign. 9. The battle left 9 French towns in ruins. After 10 months of shelling, which left not only Verdun in shambles, but also the nearby towns of Beaumont, Bezonvaux, Gamiers, Douaumont, Fleury, Aumont, Louvemont, Ornez and Vaux, and the large number of corpses on the ground, the destroyed villages were never rebuilt, but they still appear on French maps. Today, apart from a few bits of rubble, most of them can be seen as markers indicating where major roads and buildings once stood, much like the massive Russian attacks on Ukraine that left many towns in ruins. 10. Many of the unidentified Verdun dead were placed in the battlefield vaults. Although the Germans planned to bleed France dry, the Battle of Verdun resulted in roughly equal casualties on both sides, with historians Hannes Herr and Klaus Naumann calculating in 2000 that there were 143,000 German deaths and 337,000 total casualties, while on the French side, there were 162,440 deaths and 307,231 total casualties, for a total of in France, the death toll was 162,240 and the total number of casualties was 37,231, totaling 714,231, with an average of 70,000 casualties per. Because the collapse of buildings under the bombardment of the artillery made many of the fallen or their remains unrecognizable, most of the recovered bodies are housed in the Douaumont Bone Bank, a sobering memorial containing the mixed remains of at least 130,000 French and German soldiers. Although the Battle of Verdun brought France to the brink of war, it did not bring about a collapse. By insisting on regular rotation of troops on the battlefield, Marshal Pétain had 70% of the French army involved in the battle, while only 20% of the Germans were involved, resulting in a brutalized battle that had a psychological impact on both sides. In the battle for the fortress of Verdun, the French army used machine guns, mortars, and powerful catapults to fire grenades from the fortress bunkers against the attacking Germans. The battle was fought for several days and nights, and the casualties were so heavy that it became known as the Verdun meat grinder. The victory in this battle, which had defeated the German offensive plan of 1917, became a symbol of France's confidence in its determination to defend its territory. If Ukraine can win the Battle of Bakhmut, it should strengthen their confidence in recovering their territory, and at the same time, hit Russia and Putin's ambitions hard. History seems to be repeating itself again, don't you think so? Feel free to leave your comments. If you like the program, you can share it with us by clicking like and subscribe. See you in the next episode.